Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Friday Live reading series. Today we have three wonderful authors. We've got Graham Robert Scott, who's going to be reading from A Parable of Things That Crawl and Fly, which you heard some of last week from his partner in crime, Wallace Cleaves. We have Mary Rykov, who is celebrating the launch of her fabulous poetry book, which is coming out today. So it's her book birthday today. Some Conditions Apply from Inanna Press. And we have F J Bergman, who has been in many of our issues, and she's going to read one of her amazing and funny stories, or part of one anyway, and give you a taste of one today. So welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Thank you. Yes.
So the way this is going to work, we'll have readings first from Graham, and then from Mary, and then from FJ. Audience, if you have questions, put them up in the YouTube chat, and Mel is hanging out backstage, and we'll pass those over to us. And authors, I hope you can all stay on for the end, just in case we miss any questions from you. So let's start right away with Graham Robert Scott. Welcome.
Thank you. So the story, as you mentioned, is a parable of things that crawl and fly. This was written with my longtime friend Wallace Cleaves. It deals with generational divides, gig economies, and the power that stories have to preserve histories, but also to change futures. Wallace, who's a member of the Tongva community in Southern California, read his excerpt last Friday. His passage included some beautiful Tongva creation stories, but I'm going to rewind here and take us back to the story's intro. Every hour, every minute, I hear the throaty chuckling call of a raven. Sometimes he makes a showing. On the same afternoon that our unexpected visitors arrived, he appeared and gave me a disapproving look with one eye. I read the look as, "You should be working, Helen." I'd been on break for just 2 minutes. I gave him side-eye back. Even trills rest, Raven. In the distance, a plume of dust appeared on the road, signature of an oncoming car foregrounded against umber hills. Gabe tilted his spotted, bristly head toward me, slid a toothpick from one side of his mouth to the other, and flashed me a grin so I'd know a joke was coming. "I met this guy, would have been 11 years ago," Gabe said, his voice a rich timbre from a lifetime of smoking. "I was in this desert bar called Mama Jane's. One of those places with pickups out front and semis clumped like Tetris blocks out back. When this dude drags himself onto the bar stool beside me, he's bone-tired, eyes deep-seated. He also has the complexion, hair, and facial structure of a full-blooded indigenous man, which may have, I admit, prompted an involuntary snort on my part. I said nothing. I'm not always nice to reconstitutes either. It's not their fault, of course, not anyone's fault, really. Once folks realized they could swap out of their children's DNA any trace of white folks who'd raped their way into the family tree, anyone who wasn't an asshole thought that made good sense. But like other customs born of good intentions, the reconstituting practice got a bit carried away. In time, families who had been white for generations with no tribal affiliations or knowledge of native cultures were having kids who looked pre-Columbian. My problem was less with the kids than with what they represented, but on my face and my voice, it came out a lot like I didn't like them. And I'd long ago stopped apologizing for it. Of course, he heard me, Gabe said, so I felt obligated to apologize. Wuss, I thought. And when he was cool about the whole thing, I felt maybe I owed him a conversation. Grand Master wuss. For no apparent reason, the car came to a stop in the middle of the road. I wondered whether someone was fiddling with directions, having an argument, or necking in the back seat. Gabe continued. Turns out my new friend was tired on account of a sick kid, which of course meant I now had to ask about his boy. And that's how I learned, when he and his wife, also reconstituted, named their son, they wanted to use authentic Native American naming practices. Oh God, I said. You know, he continued, descriptive names. Drinks from bottle, eats with ketchup, fills a diaper. Gabe knows this sort of thing makes me mutter. I'm only an 8th Tongva, but I'm a documented member of the tribe. My whole life, I've studied our culture. 3 books, a career of public lectures, 30 peer-reviewed articles, a film documentary. In the back room of the house, 11 cryocasks contained mines bequeathed by passing elders to my one-woman institute. When I wasn't listening to Gabe or the Raven, I listened to those mines 11 hours a day, tried to provoke memories with auditory, visual, olfactory cues, tried to find evidence of what we used to be while it still existed. For decades, I've been driven by this sense that I owed this to relatives who once lived and thrived here. But even with the caskets and the mines in them, the work was hard. Memories deteriorated, became closed off, inaccessible, harder to provoke. Turned out it was easier to summon up the faces of the past than to conjure their stories. In the distance, the car started up again. This didn't really happen, Gabe, I said. He shot me a grin and continued. Guess what they named their first son? Stands with DNA? Only child, he said. He paused and waited, casual as the sun stretching its rays. I clarified. They named their first son only child? His grin expanded, revealed teeth. Fine, I'll bite. What did they name the second son? Last child. I choked on my tea. Sounds like only one of those was accurate. Oh, hell, Gabe said. Neither was. Third time around, they said fuck it and named her Sarah. As the car hummed into the driveway of our farm and slid to a stop, a raven let out a throaty warble. Gabe ignored the bird, or didn't hear him. Instead, he gestured at the car, speaking of her concertines. Having guessed who was coming from far off, Gabe had picked his story for the occasion. My son-in-law Ulrich sat in what would have once been the driver's seat, reconstituted features resembling neither of his parents, name from the wrong tribe, hair braided into a fashionable tail someone probably told him was authentic. Gloria wasn't with him. I tried to remember the last time I smelled my daughter's hair, hugged her, or had seen her smile. Then Ulrich reached into the back, to the child's seat there, with my granddaughter in it, all 18 months of her, brown as my great-grandma, fidgeting and squirming and impatient to escape her prison of straps. My heart, not expecting her to be aboard, went dizzy. There's a kind of nappy contentment that takes over when you hold your baby or grandchild. All the perils of the world take on soft, fuzzy edges. A gentle humming, oxytocin buzz. I was already feeling it, and she was still in the car. It was smart of him, bringing her.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for that reading.
Thank you.
What I love in that passage is this very delicate balance between the cynicism and the tenderness. You've got these guys making fun of this new tradition of mixing and matching DNA, and they're making fun of the traditional naming, white people doing traditional naming practices, and then you get this absolutely tender and that it rings so true, that feeling when you look at your child. So
Thank you.
I assume from that you're a parent, or
I am. I have two children, two boys.
yeah. So tell me,
both authors have children.
So I have some questions for the audience.
Okay.
First, the journalist or the author, how do you merge the two? And P.S. that joke gives me stitches.
I myself was a journalist for years, for a decade or so, before I turned to academia, and then from there to fiction writing.
And I want to ask you a little bit about the process you and Wallace had when you wrote this story.
Sure. Well, it started off as an entry for a contest that we didn't win, and partly because I think we never really bought into the premise of the contest. I don't know that really deserves a lot of elaboration there. But at some point after it didn't make it, we kind of revisited the story and thought about what did we like about it and what wasn't working. And mostly what wasn't working was the stuff that we put in there for the contest. So we got rid of that stuff and rewired it around the stuff we liked. And so the later version was very different, I think, from the first version. I did all the drafting was mostly we would collaborate on the planning and sort of the outlining and the ideas, and then I would kind of hammer out a first draft of pretty much everything except the mythological legend stuff. And then he'd go in and peer review the heck out of everything that I'd written, and then we would work on trying to figure out how to fit the pieces together, and what structure and organization to give it. So, yeah.
I think that's a really great object lesson in writing what you know and love, as opposed to trying to write to a contest or a trend, or what publishers are looking for.
Right. I was just going to say I was going to dovetail with that and say that it's also like it's a pretty good example, I think, of there's almost always gold in the stuff that you've written before, and that you can kind of like mine, or that Neil Gaiman's term is compost heap. You can kind of just always get stuff out of your old material, even if it didn't work in its previous incarnation. There's some kind of life possibly for it, or parts of it.
Well, thank you so much. Stay around. There may be more questions coming.
Will do.
And I'm going to bring Mary Rykov onto the stage. So, Mary Rykov, you may know from previous issues of the magazine as Mary H. Auerbach Rykov, and in her bio it's Maria Elena Auerbach Rykov, because she is a Puerto Rican Canadian. And but we know her as Mary Rykov, and she has been our proofreader ever since. We first met in issue 2 when we had a poem published there, and she offered to become our proofreader after that, and she's been with us ever since. So, welcome, Mary, and congratulations on the birth of your book. Some conditions apply.
Thank you. Yes, today is my book birthday. And the first poem I'm going to read is the first poem that published in Pulp in issue 2, illustrated by the wonderful Mel Anastasiou, and I hope you bring those on. Thanks for all the fish. In The Siren's Tale. A thrashing fish, struggling to spit free of the hook, meets a rudderless boat adrift between winds and currents, vying to control its destiny. Along comes a gentle man who, lighting in her food and drink, fears the dangerous comforts of her refuge. He says, "I just want to be friends." She says, "Stop kissing my mouth."
I love that poem.
And the next, I do too. You got one of my favorites. But this next poem is a difficult poem, historical poem that I'm reading in honor of everybody listening from BC. Cadaver number 929-75. Tension simmers this music I speak. Pregnant with the world, babies pop from me, and as I spin their cradles from my own gut string, my mind splits open like a robin's egg, cracked but still singing. Enslaved by feathers and blood on my windowsill, holy water wells like stigmata in my palms. Lonely as God before the invention of color, I leave only land behind after metaphors fail. The mountain presence rejects nothing. I bum slide down these mountains and splat into the sea already so full with bones and miracles, my closed quartz throat a bloodstone dark jewel of history. Swirling in the cold prick of bubbles on my underbelly, I sink, reach center, and roil in its wake. Only my lover sees me with human eyes, eyes that stain the sky bloody with beetle juice. I approach this lover so rough with need that by day's end his empty scrotum sags. But first we fall thrashing like fish in salt chuck. The firemen will say, "They must have smoked in bed. Just don't step there where the slugs ooze viscid mess." When my film splinters white, I do not wake because I am already married to a different dangerous man who rattles the stones in my skull's cavity and scrapes my knees on ice cleaved ground, a husband whose hammerhead indents my occipital bone as he shatters me and splatters my blood. No care can efface this Janus pain love that barks while the sun stands still in its frozen ring of trumpets, and love turns to milkstone. Pulled lifeless from Furry Creek, they identify cadaver number 929-75 and Mrs. Pat Lowther as one and the same. How dare they doubt me, doubt I can be this husk. Pat Lowther died by spousal homicide in 1975 when she was president of the League of Canadian Poets. On that happy note, I'm going to finish with Taraxicum Officinale, that also published in Pulp Literature. Remind me what issue?
Issue 9.
Thank you. Also illustrated by the illustrious Mel Anastasia. Taraxicum Officinale has become the mascot for my new book. Gold and globes sporting on her windowsill in the chill of winter, improvise in the key of February. Thank you, Pulp Literature. Thank you, Inanna Publications, and happy birthday. Some conditions apply.
Thank you for those wonderful poems, Mary. And I was so moved by that one about Pat Lowther. What's the title of it again?
Cadaver number 929-75.
Wow. Yeah, that's an amazing poem, and I think I think you've given us a great selection of your work, from the very lighthearted Siren and to that very moving, serious poem. I've had somebody ask. You said that launch will be virtual. Do you have a date for that?
Yes, we do have a date. It's June 18th. From 5 to 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Oh, nice.
There'll be information coming out about that.
Wonderful.
Watch on Twitter, watch my website blog.
Wonderful. And we will put a link to Mary's Twitter and her website up on the YouTube comments, so you'll be able to click on those and find them. And we will publicize your launch whenever we have details of that.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for those wonderful readings. And we're going to get a little more lighthearted even still as we bring F J Bergman onto the stage. F J Bergman has manifested in Analog, Asimov's Apex, and everywhere else in the alphabet. She's the editor of Starline, which is a science fiction and fantasy poetry association journal. And I believe you're also editor of Mobius, journal Social Change.
Yes.
And she has been in 4 of our issues. We always love it when one of her stories comes into our submissions pile. So we did Opening Doors in issue 6, How to Lose a Week in issue 13, For Your Convenience in issue 16, and we did Yellow Paint in issue 24. And I've got issue 13 up on the screen there because FJ is going to give us a reading from How to Lose a Week.
Monday. After accidentally pouring reconstituted orange juice instead of milk into the remaining half cup of coffee, you make a snap decision that it's okay to go to the art museum instead of work, since you are late to work anyway. When your car won't start, because someone who shall not be named left the interior light on, you decide to hitchhike downtown. The 18-wheeler that picks you up is going to Florida. You decide that's even more okay. You spend the rest of the day traveling south and taking notes for future use in a roman, while the trucker tells you his very interesting life story. He talks a lot faster than you are used to. Tuesday. In the wee hours, somewhere near Atlanta, Georgia, the trucker, who has become progressively more wild-eyed and chatty and for some reason hasn't needed to stop for anything but gas, informs you that an alien spaceship is landing on the road ahead. and then he climbs over the back of his seat, screaming, "The tentacles! The tentacles!" You hastily grab the steering wheel. With his foot off the gas, the truck gradually decelerates, and you are able to steer it onto the shoulder where it coasts to a stop, and you turn off the ignition. You are unable to persuade the whimpering truck driver to uncurl from a fetal position, so you decide to walk to a nearby exit, taking the truck's keys with you to prevent any unfortunate incidents. Halfway to the exit ramp, the aliens wave their tentacles at you, and one calls out, in a shrill voice with a British accent, "Need a ride, love?" The aliens are going to Florida, too. They want to see Disney World, which their travel agent recommended. They got lost and stopped to look at the road signs. It figures. Their map is 22 years old. They seem puzzled that you can tell them where to go, even though you are older than the map and even though you have never been to Disney World. When you get to Disney World, it turns out the aliens have no money. The agent had suggested they use the employee entrance. Luckily, you have credit cards. Also, luckily, they are short enough to get child rate tickets. There are not enough of them to merit family rate. They are crazy about caffeinated soda and cotton candy. Pretty soon they are talking almost as fast as the truck driver. They throw up on every ride, but it doesn't bother them one bit. The blue skies are cloudless, and it's sunny and warm and nice, and you wish you had shorts and a t-shirt and flip-flops, at least until you realize how corrosive the alien stomach acids are. At sunset, their eyes begin to emit tiny green sparks, and they reluctantly agree to go back to the spaceship. They are waddling a lot more slowly, and you have to carry 2 of them. You are almost sure there are fewer of them than you came in with, but they don't seem to care. The aliens decide to spend the night on a beach. They have heard of jellyfish, but don't really believe in them. Their ship cruises along the coastline while they argue about where to land. You see a bar with tropical drinks in blinking neon. It is a very noisy bar, and you suggest that right next to the bar would be a good place to park. You have to explain what a bar is, but they are quite interested, especially after you explain alcohol. The bar is extremely crowded, even though the band, Pooter Squat, is the worst and loudest you have ever heard. It is easy to get drinks because the aliens say they will have whatever you are having. Pineapple mango daiquiris. After the 3rd round, the aliens try to dance, which results in lots of people buying them drinks, which is a good thing because your credit cards are almost maxed out. Their dancing is drawing attention to the point where you are able to lift several wallets from oblivious bar patrons and extract the contents. Some of those guys have lots of cash. At closing time, the band's lead singer, who has been drinking gin rickeys, 7 of them by your count, tries to hit on one of the aliens, and you take him along to the ship. It turns out they do have rectal probes, but he seems to enjoy it. Wednesday. The aliens natter on about wanting to meet jellyfish. After dropping the still comatose lead singer, Bobo, back at his motel, they speak of returning in a few weeks to see how the grubs are maturing. And getting breakfast at a diner, you suggest that they head for the keys. Earlier, you had presented the aliens with the truck keys as a valuable Earth ceremonial artifact, hoping that they would reciprocate with something interesting. So they are a bit confused until you show them the map again. They become excited on finding out that the shapes of the islands in the archipelago spell out a very naughty word indeed in their own language. The word is unfortunately untranslatable, even into French. You explain that the keys may no longer be exactly the same shapes. You then explain about sand and erosion and tides and storms. They have a lot of trouble believing in weather, especially when you mention hurricanes.
We are out of time, but that was wonderful. I enjoyed that story so much. I enjoy hearing it read out loud.
It was a lot of fun to write. It does not quite accurately reflect my personal life, although I will never say no to either the pineapple mango daiquiris, or to lobster.
Oh, good to know.
Never arrived.
And not even in French line cracked me up. It's a good thing I was muted at the time.
I have to make a confession. My appearances in Analog and Asimov are only for poetry rather than fiction. I'm usually a speculative poet. This is my latest book, also from 2017, A Catalog of the Further Suns, which won the Gold Line Press Chapbook Award and the SFPA Elgin Award. It is possibly the only book in the universe where the judge's comments on the back include a WTF.
So I have some questions and comments from the audience, and just scrolling back, there were some for Mary's reading, which Carolyn Klink said, fantastic. Megan Swain, can't wait to read it. There was, thank you, Mary. Congratulations on the book. That was, sometimes I can't tell which person the comments come from. And then
doesn't matter. These are my poetry buddies.
Oh, and no, not all of them. Alana Kay said, I think that was the congratulations and beautiful reading. And were two comments. And then moving further down the stream for FJ, excellent, so funny, excellent reading. I laughed out loud. Alana Kay said, I think I annoyed my neighbors laughing. And Carolyn Klink said, thanks, FJ. Wallace, Cleaves, love the humor of that section, and great reading, Graham. So lots of audience out there. Before we wrap up, I wanted to ask each of you what you're working on right now. So let's go from left to right. Start with Graham.
All right. I'm working on a mid-length story, probably. I'm actually gone through a couple revisions on this one, and I'm still trying to fine-tune it. But it's a bit of horror fiction that's set in the CIA archives and involves an archivist. Anyway, we'll see how that one turns out when I'm done.
All right. And Mary, what are you're just celebrating right now, but do you have anything else you're thinking about working on?
Oh yes, I'm in the middle of expanding a creative nonfiction essay into book form. That's what I'm working on. What? But poetry keeps butting in.
It's a welcome intruder.
Yeah.
And FJ?
I was trying to compile a full-length manuscript, and then I realized that I needed to divide it up into subcategories, which became 4 manuscripts. And then I realized that each of those was, in fact, long enough to make at least 3. So now I'm apparently working on a dozen different full-length manuscripts of poetry. And I only have enough stories right now for a fiction chapbook, but I've been sending one of those around as well.
Oh, wonderful. Well, your stories are always welcome in our submissions folder, so something new comes up, send it our way. Well, thank you everybody for joining us, and same time next week, 10 a.m. Pacific time, we'll have another 3 wonderful authors to read for you. Stay safe, everybody.